Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions: the mystery of the Vinca Script, Balkan symbols that predate Sumerian writing by 2,000 years. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction, not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. The invention of writing is one of the defining events in human history, the moment when thought became permanent, when records outlasted memory, when civilization as we know it became possible. The conventional story places this invention in Mesopotamia around 200 BCE, where the Sumerians developed cuneiform writing to keep records of grain and livestock. And this is when writing that unambiguously serves administrative purposes first appears in a complete documented system. But there is a competing claim, and it has been making archaeologists uncomfortable since the 1960s. A collection of symbols incised on pottery and figurines from Balkan Neolithic sites of the Vinca culture, dated to between 500 and 500 BCE, that predates Sumerian writing by more than 2,000 years. The Vinca symbols, more than 700 distinct signs identified across hundreds of artifacts from sites in Serbia, Romania, Bulgaria, and Hungary, are incised marks that appear consistently and repeatedly on pottery vessels, clay objects, and figurines. They include geometric shapes, abstract signs, and what appear to be ideographic elements. They are found at multiple separate sites across a wide geographic area. They appear in consistent patterns, specific signs appearing in specific contexts, some signs appearing more frequently than others, certain signs clustered together in ways that suggest combinations rather than random decoration. Several researchers, including archaeologist Harold Harmon, have argued that these characteristics indicate a true writing system, one used to record language, not just to decorate or mark property. The mainstream archaeological view is more cautious, that the Vinca symbols are a symbolic system, possibly used for religious or identity purposes, but not demonstrably a writing system in the full sense. The key distinction is whether the symbols encode language, whether someone who knew the system could read a sequence of symbols and understand the words they represented. For cuneiform and Egyptian hieroglyphs, this is provable because we have deciphered them. For the Vinca symbols, it remains unprovable because we have no bilingual text, no way to test whether the symbols correspond to sounds or words, and no linguistic descendant that might provide a key. The Vinca symbols are the oldest complex symbolic system in Europe. Whether they are the oldest writing in the world depends on how we define writing, and that question remains genuinely open. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we go further, if you are finding this investigation compelling, please take a moment right now to like this video, drop a comment below with your thoughts, and share it with someone who loves a good historical mystery. If you are watching on YouTube, hit subscribe and tap the bell icon so you never miss a new episode. If you found us through Facebook, tap follow on our page. It takes just a few seconds, and it genuinely helps us keep making these documentaries. Now, let us get back to the investigation. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the broader phenomenon of lost civilizations, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. For as long as human beings have told stories, they have told stories about what was lost. Every great culture on Earth carries myths of a golden age, a time before the current order, when civilization stood taller, knew more, and reached further than anything that came after. For centuries, scholars categorized these stories as allegory, comforting fictions invented by cultures to explain the gap between their aspirations and their achievements. But a quiet revolution in archaeology, geology, and oceanography has changed that calculus. The evidence now accumulating from seafloors, ice cores, and ancient texts is demanding a fundamental revision of the human story, one in which the line between myth and memory is far thinner than we imagined. The conventional timeline of civilization holds that complex urban society first emerged in Mesopotamia around 3500 BC. Before that, scattered farming villages, nomadic hunter-gatherers, and nothing more. But this tidy narrative has been challenged repeatedly by anomalous discoveries that do not fit the accepted sequence. Megalithic structures dated to 10,000 BC or earlier. Astronomical alignments encoded in monuments by cultures supposedly too primitive to understand the sky. Mathematical ratios embedded in architecture that would not be formally derived for thousands of years. These discoveries are not fringe fabrications. They are measured, published, and debated in peer-reviewed literature. They point toward a past far more complex than the textbooks describe. What happens when a civilization falls? Most of its knowledge disappears. The libraries burn, the engineers die, the farmers abandon the fields. Within a generation or two, the grandchildren of architects are living in the ruins of buildings they cannot build. We know this happened in the Bronze Age collapse of 1200 BC, when a networked civilization spanning the Mediterranean was destroyed in a matter of decades. We know it from the fall of Rome. History is not a steady march of progress. It is punctuated by catastrophic resets, after which humanity must begin again. The question is whether some of those resets happened far earlier than we know, and whether their traces are still waiting to be found beneath our feet. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades, and patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding the Vinca Script, Balkan symbols that predate Sumerian writing by 2,000 years, is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. The Vinca culture is a Neolithic archaeological culture named after the site of Vinca below Brdo, located on the Danube River just east of Belgrade, Serbia, which was excavated beginning in 1908 by Miloj Vazic. The culture existed from approximately 700 to 500 BCE in the Central Balkans and produced a sophisticated material culture, including high-quality fired pottery, copper tools, among the earliest metalwork in Europe, clay figurines, and the distinctive symbolic marks that have generated the writing controversy. The Vinca culture was part of the broader Old European civilizations described by archaeologist Marija Gimbutas, which preceded the arrival of Indo-European steppe peoples in southeastern Europe. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered the Vinca symbol inventory, as catalogued by various researchers, includes approximately 200-700 distinct signs depending on the classification method used. The most common signs include spirals, meanders, chevrons, parallel lines, crosses, and more complex figurative elements. A distinctive feature is the sign for a comb or rake, which appears repeatedly across the entire Vinca culture area. A major systematic analysis of the symbols by archaeologist Marco Merlini and Gia Lazarovasi identified 272 base signs and proposed a typological classification into categories including religious, numeric, and writing signs, though this classification itself reflects their pro-writing interpretation. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine. The dating of Vinca symbols has been refined significantly through improved radiocarbon dating since the 1990s. The oldest securely dated Vinca symbols come from Tartaria in Romania, where in 1961, excavator Nicolae Vlasa found 3 clay tablets with incised symbols in a pit that also contained the charred bones of an adult human being. The tablets bear symbols including an ideographic head, a tree or plant, and other signs that bear a resemblance to early Sumerian pictographic signs. Initial radiocarbon dates from the charred bones gave a calibrated date of approximately 5300-5000 BCE, placing the tablets more than 2000 years before Sumerian writing. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation, but the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, the resemblance between some Vinca symbols and early Sumerian pictographs, first noted in the 1960s, has been used to argue for either a connection, the Vinca symbols influenced Sumerian writing, or for an early common symbolic tradition from which both derived. Researchers, including Adam Falkenstein, noted that several Vinca signs have counterparts in early Sumerian proto-cuneiform. However, the geographic and temporal separation between the Vinca culture, Balkans, 500-3, 500 BCE, and early Sumer, southern Mesopotamia, approximately 200 BCE, makes direct cultural transmission unlikely under current models. The resemblances may reflect parallel invention or a shared ancestral symbolic tradition. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of the social context of the Vinca symbols, the types of objects on which they appear, and the patterns of their distribution is crucial evidence for their interpretation. The symbols appear most frequently on pottery vessels and clay figurines, in contexts associated with ritual or ceremonial activity. They also appear as potter's marks, identifying the maker of vessels, and as marks on weights and tools. The contextual diversity, ritual objects, craft markers, measuring implements, is itself a challenge to any single interpretation. Different types of signs may have served different functions within a complex symbolic system. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding. The counterargument to the oldest writing claim rests primarily on the lack of demonstrated linguistic encoding. Linguists note that a true writing system must encode language. It must be capable of expressing any proposition that can be spoken. The Vinca symbols, as far as can be determined from the available evidence, appear to be used in contexts, marking pottery, adorning figurines, that do not require the encoding of complex linguistic propositions. They resemble other prehistoric European symbolic systems, cave art signs, megalithic symbols that are clearly not writing. The burden of proof for the writing claim is high, and the evidence has not yet met it, though it has not definitively disproved it either. Taken together, These facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations. And in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the Vinca Script, Balkan symbols that predate Sumerian writing by 2,000 years. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that the proto-writing theory is the mainstream scholarly compromise. The Vinca symbols represent a proto-writing or symbolic notation system that functioned as a memory aid, property marker, or ritual signifier, but did not encode spoken language in the systematic way required for full writing. Under this model, the Vinca symbols are comparable to the tally marks, owner's marks, and decorative conventions of other prehistoric cultures, rather than to phonetic or logographic writing systems. This interpretation acknowledges the sophistication of the Vinca system while declining to call it writing without evidence of linguistic encoding. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that the full writing system theory, associated primarily with Harold Harman and Marco Merlini, holds that the Vinca symbols constitute the world's earliest writing system, predating Sumerian cuneiform by at least 2,000 years. Proponents argue that the consistency of the signs across a wide geographic area over more than 1,000 years, the complexity of the sign inventory, and the patterned occurrence of signs in combination are all consistent with a linguistic encoding system. They have proposed connections between the Vinca signs and later Aegean scripts, Linear A, the Cypro-Minoan syllabary, arguing for a continuous Danube script tradition. This theory is held by a minority of researchers and is contested on methodological grounds. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that the independent parallel development theory avoids both the proto-writing and true writing debates by proposing that the Vinca symbols and Sumerian writing are independent developments that resemble each other because of constraints on the human cognitive representation of complex information. Under this model, humans inventing systems for recording information tend to converge on similar shapes, spirals, crosses, parallel lines, because the human visual system is attuned to these patterns and the human hand produces them naturally. The Vinca symbols are the earliest known example of a complex symbol system, but they have no direct relationship to Mesopotamian writing. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the Vinca Script, Balkan symbols that predate Sumerian writing by 2,000 years, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes the Tartaria tablets are the most debated single piece of evidence in the Vinca Script controversy. The tablets' early radiocarbon date, if the association between the burned bones and the tablets is valid, would place them before any known writing. However, questions have been raised about the stratigraphic context of the tablets, whether they were in a genuine ancient deposit or in a disturbed pit that mixed earlier and later materials. A reanalysis of the Tartaria site context in the 1990 suggested that the tablets might have been placed in the pit with the charred bones as a deliberate ritual deposit rather than as a casual discard, raising questions about whether the bones' radiocarbon date applies to the tablets. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented statistical analysis of the Vinca sign frequencies and combinations conducted by multiple researchers using computational methods, has found that the Vinca symbols follow a distribution pattern similar to, though distinguishable from, linguistic systems and significantly differ from random decoration. The non-random distribution of signs, some signs appearing much more frequently than others, and specific signs appearing in patterned combinations, is consistent with a system that encodes categorical information, whether linguistic or otherwise. This statistical evidence supports the interpretation of the Vinca signs as a true symbolic system with grammar, but does not establish linguistic encoding. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed the geographic distribution of Vinca symbols across multiple sites, separated by hundreds of kilometers over a period of more than 1,000 years, is evidence for a shared symbolic system maintained by a connected cultural community. Random or individually invented decorative marks would be expected to diverge across time and space. The consistency of Vinca sign forms across the full extent of the culture suggests that the signs were learned and transmitted, that there was a tradition of correct sign use, rather than being independently invented at each site. This transmission model is more consistent with a functional system, whether writing or another form of structured communication, than with casual decoration. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the Vinca Script, Balkan symbols that predate Sumerian writing by 2,000 years. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked. in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. The Vinca Script debate continues in the academic literature with no definitive resolution. The Istituto di Studi Avanzati for Cultural Heritage and Environment in Mediterranean area in Italy and the Vinca Institute in Belgrade have conducted ongoing research into the sign corpus and its interpretation. Digital databases of Vinca signs have been compiled and are being analyzed using computational linguistics methods that may eventually provide more rigorous tests of whether the sign distribution is consistent with linguistic encoding. The broader question of when symbolic communication became writing and whether the distinction is meaningful or arbitrary has gained new relevance in the context of cognitive archaeology and the study of prehistoric human cognition. The capacity for symbolic communication appears to be much older than any documented writing system. Paleolithic cave art shows sophisticated symbolic thinking. And the question of where the line falls between advanced symbol use and writing may be as much philosophical as empirical. Whatever the Vinca symbols are, they are the earliest known example of a complex, shared, transmitted symbolic system in European history, a form of human communication that was functioning in the Balkans while the world that would eventually produce writing was still, by conventional reckoning, in the Stone Age. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the Vinca Script, Balkan symbols that predate Sumerian writing by 2,000 years, from the historical record through physical evidence across the competing theories and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Vinca Script ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please help us reach more people. If you are watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new documentary. If you are watching on Facebook, tap the follow button on our page to stay connected. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.